Okay, so we're live now, and welcome everyone to season 2 of Heart to Heart with the Hive. Today is a very special episode. One is because I'm not doing this alone. I'm doing this with Varat, my B in the crime. Okay, and and apart from that, we have a very special guest. I think, for those of you who've been following Hive, you've understood that Hive collectively has a very unhealthy obsession with all things horror. So it is only natural that our first guest would be somebody who is a very well known in the world of horror and horror literature. So, with 12 books to his credit, he is a known name in the Indian literary world. In fact, he's been published with leading publishers such as Penguin Random House. Varad, you will have to go on mute. I'm sorry. Yeah. So he's been published with leading publishers such as Penguin Random House, Rupa Publications, Hatchet, among others. He's won screen adaptation deals for 4 of his books. And in fact, he's been known as a top 7 Indian horror writers to be looked out for by UK's Desi Blitz magazine. He's considered as one of the forerunners in Indian contemporary horror, and he's also the president of the India chapter of Horror Writers Association. So, any guesses? I mean, this is like easy peasy, lemon squeezy. That is it. Yeah, so you're right. Your guesses are absolutely right. It is the Neil De Silva.
Thank you so much.
Welcome on board, Neil. It's wonderful to have you here.
I was listening to the words from Lakshmi and, I'm floored. Thank you so much. So glad to hear that.
And one thing what LP forgot to add is that Neil is someone who is very supportive of up-and-coming authors. And as we at the Hive, we know firsthand. Like when we went to Neil with our request to write a forward for our very first edition, Route 30. That was our first attempt. There was no Hive before that. So he didn't say no. He didn't. He was actually very enthusiastic about the whole project. And he wanted more people to, get into this amazing genre that is horror. And he read each on every story and actually came up with a wonderful forward for that. And he has been continuously supporting up and coming authors through his group for writers by authors. And that's amazing. That's more power to you, Neil.
Thank you so much. And horror is something that is still growing in India. That's what I believe. Though we have such a huge tradition of horror from right from the 70s, but still it is at a nascent stage, I would say. We are still growing. We are a small community, and but our readers are dedicated. So, hats off to our readers. They stay with us. And I think we should support each other in such endeavors.
Right.
Yeah, I think if I have to be so bold, I have to say horror is not a genre; it's a cult.
Yeah,
it's a yeah. Like you said, it's like this dedicated group of readers who are complete enthusiasts and aficionados when it comes to horror. Right.
That's
okay.
what I have absolutely noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. People follow us. Right, carries on.
Agreed. Yes. So, Neil, I mean, I am sure you've been asked this question multiple number of times, but it's very important that we start with this, and especially for people who are watching one of your live interviews for the first time. What made you into a writer? What made you who you are today? And second thing, very important, I'm sure your mom also asked you that. Why did you choose horror?
Yes, you got that very right, because my mom did ask me that. When I published my first book, that is Maya's New Husband, and I went to her house to give her a copy, and she came to know that it is a book on serial killers. The first question that she asked me is, how do you know so much about serial killers? So definitely that happened. And now coming to your question, I think it all started right in my school days, seventh standard. I think that was the time when my reading really opened up. There were lots of books in my house, and my dad was a very big collector of books. I would not say reader; he didn't have the time, but he definitely had books from roof to ceiling, floor to
Mm.
ceiling. And it was like, an open library in the house. I would just be able to take whichever book I wanted, and invariably my attention would go to the horror section, which he had kept up there so nobody should touch. But I would keep that stool, climb up and take it. And that was the age when I read Dracula, Frankenstein, and I'm not talking about abridged versions also, I'm talking about the
Right.
pure stuff.
Mm.
And The Picture of Dorian Gray, that was one more book I read. And when I read those, I was a cowardly child. I used to get scared of
Mm.
everything. I had every phobia, you name the phobia, and I had it as a child. But somehow, when I was reading those books, I was not afraid of them. That didn't happen. I didn't know why. On the contrary, I wanted to create those kind of stories. Yeah, I was
Mm.
completely enraptured by the gothic scene that these stories
Right.
had. And even today, if people see my writing, they will see that there is a lot of gothic element in it, in every
Mm.
story that I write, because that has carried on. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to write monsters, and I wanted to create that fantasy, that
Mm.
dark fantasy. That was where my interests veered. And it was not that I read only horror. I read everything. I read at that age. I read Tinkles, Amay Chitrakatha. I read a
Mm.
lot of young romance, Enid Blyton, all kinds of
Uh-huh.
stuff. But these were the books where I came back again and again. And one
Right.
more thing, very quickly, I'll tell you. My dad was a subtitlist. He used to
Mm-hmm.
subtitle movies from Hindi to English. So in
Ah.
those days,
Okay.
the movies used to come to my house, scripts, and my
Mm-hmm.
dad, crack nights, and he would just
Mm.
type because he had other jobs, so he was
Right.
freelancing. All the producers of those times, their movies used to come at our place, but the most prolific of them were the Ramses. So every
Okay.
Ramsey movie, a week before release, would land at our doorstep, and my dad had to then translate it in 3 days. And these would
Wow.
come with there's something known as a song book in those days. Now they don't
Okay.
exist. So they had the pictures of the stills of the movie and all that. So I used to sit
Ah.
next to dad and see how his fingers used to fly on the typewriter, and see those songbooks, see the scripts. So that was where, dad used to also discuss with me, see, this story is going like this, now the scene is, this is happening. So that was where I think, a very cinema paradiso kind of thing. Would sit next to him and learn like how scripts are made. So at that age, seventh standard, when you are getting
Mm.
exposed to something like technical scripts, I think
Right.
that can never go away. That is a kind of education that will never go away. And because it was horror, I learned a lot of it. That was how it began, I suppose.
Oh, that's a really wonderful backdrop to your whole launch of your career.
Yeah.
That's
And also, one more thing I need to mention, I'm a Halloween baby. I was born on 31st October. So,
perfect.
yeah.
The stars aligned for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so jealous of you, Neil, because to be honest, when I was in seventh grade, the only thing we would get to watch was Khoonbari Mang, because that
Yeah.
was the only VHS tape we had.
Yeah. No, my
So,
parents were very cool that way. They didn't
Mhm.
censor anything for us, whether
Okay.
it was movies or books and stuff. But yeah, we decided what we wanted to watch and not. If suppose something was out of the way, I would myself not watch it.
Okay.
So I knew how much I could take, and I knew my
Mm.
limits. So because of that, I think that trust was reciprocated from my parents also.
Right.
They allowed me to explore.
That's very healthy. Yes.
Yeah.
So, so that happened, and but you wrote Maya's new husband when you were 39,
Yeah.
and and you were talking about when you were 7, and you
Yes.
wrote your first book at 39, and you said you have been interested in writing from that age. Why
Yes.
such a long gap? Almost 2 decades and a half.
I'm reminded of John Lennon now. Life is what happens when you are busy making other plans. So my dad lost his job immediately, when I reached grade 9 or something. Then he
Mhm.
started tuitions at home, and I joined him for tuitions. I mean, I used to assist him as a
Mhm.
like got into that line. And eventually,
Mhm.
when I finished my post graduation, the very next day I started my own coaching class. So because
Okay. Wow.
it was that kind of situation, a very hand to mouth
Mhm.
existence that we had. And then we went to this, I somehow fell into the coaching class line. And there again, there was a good feedback from the students. Then the students would not let me go. And
Mhm.
the coaching class became bigger, it became still bigger. We had 500 students in a year at a time, 40 staff. So I was completely into that. I mean, my life was for 18 years, for the next 18 years, from my post graduation till the time I actually
Mhm.
wrote, I was, you could say, I spent the major part of my day in that one classroom. And
Wow.
that was also where things started to rankle me. Like, will
Mhm.
I be just in this one room, in this classroom? And
Right. Right.
the students are going all over the place because in two
Mhm.
decades, you know where they will go. And I
Absolutely.
had this writing bug that was never gone. So
Mhm.
I used to do some freelance writing on the side. In fact, not
Okay.
some, a lot of freelance writing. So the
Mhm.
moment I would reach home, I had these clients from US and everywhere, UK, and freelancing had just started in India in 2004. So I
Wow.
was one of the first people to. I still have my accounts on sites like freelancer.com, and
Oh.
the 5-star reviews are still there. I have not removed them. And I
Wonderful.
made a lot of money freelancing and coaching
Mhm.
class. And I bought a house in Mumbai and got married, had kids. And that was when I started thinking, where is my life really going? I mean, everything is done. The only thing
Mhm.
that is not done is the one thing that I wanted to do.
Right.
And my wife saw that. My wife saw that, and she said that if you do not want to teach any further, like you have taught for a major part of your life, and I never had a kind of when your education ends, you have a kind of break, and then you go into a job. That never happened.
Mhm.
I never had that exploration phase. So
Right.
then she told me that do what you feel like. If you want to write a book, give it a year,
Mhm.
write a book, and then we'll see how it goes. If the book does well, continue. That was what we mutually decided. Even if not, continue, but then we'll decide what to do. So in 1 year, my new husband happened. It did well. I got a screen offer and stuff, and then I
Mhm.
thought it is not possible and not advisable to sail in two boats at the
Right.
same time. That is where I entered full time into writing, and here I am 6 years later, 12 books down. Yeah.
Perfect. That's like your story is like fit for like on-screen material. It has enough, material. It is a journey, right? See, because you said like you had troubles, getting money out to lead your day-to-day life, and then from there you get into something, and then you grow from there, and you had the guts to let it all go overnight. Well,
Yes.
that's nothing
Right.
sort of like a movie material.
It was quite scary, Varad. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. You cannot describe that decision, that phase when you take that decision, because there were these blank moments. Like you don't know what you will do. And that first year, when I had taken that, I just shut down the classes where
Okay.
like so many students were coming, and we still had the EMI going. So
Wow.
I just shut it down. I didn't want it anymore. And
Hmm.
that 1 year was very difficult. Like, I had never seen such a low bank balance after my
Hmm.
earning life had started. So
Right.
we went to that kind of area. But I tightened my belt. I took up editing
Hmm.
jobs, and my wife took up a job as a teacher, which she's doing very well
Hmm.
even now.
Wow.
And things tided over. We are
Right.
here. We are here talking. So
Yeah,
everything's
yeah. You never let go of your dream. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. There's a lot of things to take away from your
We
journey.
should label this as my TED talk. This.
So, but again, coming to Maya's new husband, you came out with a book
Hmm.
when there was a complete vacuum in the Indian horror scene. Because
Hmm.
see, Indians in Indian literature, we have had horror, but then there was nothing. There was this huge gap of no horror book coming out. And how did you? What was the response you faced? What was the reception you faced? How did you go about marketing your book?
See, today when I see the new authors today,
Hmm.
I'm really surprised and I'm in fact in awe of them at the effort that they put for their first book. They have a whole marketing plan ready, and they know exactly what they want to do. Some of them even research on what kind of genre they should write, then what would be the. They have stuff like, target audience is perfectly known to them. I did not know any of this. Nothing. Zilch. I was not a marketing person at all. I had absolutely no idea even how social media works. I had just joined Facebook that year. So
Okay.
I didn't even know that, right? And Facebook was the only thing we had in 2015. There was
Right.
2014 rather, and there was no Instagram. And Twitter, is not for promoting books. So, that was how it was. But I knew one thing, and I knew that I want to write this story only. I had no other story in mind, like it was
Right.
not planned decision that I'm writing horror.
Hmm.
It was not like one day I sat and I thought whether I should write romance or mythology or thriller or
Hmm.
mystery, or it was horror. Also, funny fact, I did not know that that book is actually a horror book at that time. I did not know it. I just knew
Okay.
that it's a dark story. It's a story
Hmm.
of a woman who is trapped in this marriage with a man who eventually is a serial killer.
Hmm.
I just knew that. I did not have any labels, any tags. I did not even know who would read the book apart from my wife and me. I did not know anything. I just typed the book during the NaNoWriMo month of November 2014. In
Okay.
21 days, I even typed the book. I did not
Hmm.
know what is the process. I was learning bits and pieces here and there. But, I just spoke about my financial state. So we did not have
Hmm.
money to, even for a cover designer or for an editor. Like, it was not a plan. It was
Yeah.
just a kind of hobby that I just wanted to take a little bit further.
Hmm.
So, but then, yeah, a cover designer. I had a student who was a cover designer, so it worked out very well. He did a
Hmm.
fabulous job with the first cover. He's doing the cover for Maya's Newsman 2 too as well
Wow. Okay.
now. So, yeah, so it went well, and that is how I just took the book when it was finished, and I put it on Amazon KDP, because I had
Hmm.
just learned at that time that okay, there is this thing known as Amazon KDP. If you
Hmm.
put the book there, then people can buy it on Kindle. You get some money if it is purchased,
Right.
and people read it. Now, when I was on KDP, when I was uploading the book, that is the time I came to know, Are, now I have to put a category for this.
Hmm.
Then I was scratching my head. Now, what would be the categories? Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. I saw horror. This fits
Hmm.
horror. That is
Right.
how I chose horror. It was not a plan. And now, like, horror is a part of me.
Okay.
That one moment where I chose horror,
Hmm.
that was a split second kind of thing. And it has now, like, defined me. So
Yes.
I'm very
And
in this
yeah,
job.
6 years later, you're published with Penguin, and you just signed a second, contract with Penguin. So congratulations on that as
Thank
well.
you so much. Thank you so much.
It's been quite
I think this
the ride.
is, yeah, yeah. This is such a, I don't know. I have no words to describe your journey, Neil.
Hmm.
It's funny, it's awe-inspiring, it's motivating, it's everything. And the funniest part is how you came to be a horror writer, right? I mean,
So I think
it was selection, yeah.
it's all a plan. I mean, it's not our plan, it's a divine plan, I
Hmm.
would say. So
Exactly,
you
exactly. I
are
completely
supposed
agree.
to fall somewhere, and you
Hmm.
fall there in that slot, and that defines your whole life. How fascinating is that? So,
Absolutely, I
See,
agree. It's like the
see.
universe came together, and
yeah.
it's like an arrow pointing horror, horror, horror. That's
The
your
Shah Rukh
future.
Khan dialogue, I don't remember the dialogue, but from Om Shanti Om, the same thing that he says. And when you want something, puri shiddat se, then
Ha.
सारी कायनात आ जाती है, something like that. The dialogue is.
Yes, yes, yes,
That was
yes.
what happened.
I quite vividly remember that one.
Yeah. So that is how.
So
That is.
we have quite a few people watching this live, and we have a few questions.
Okay.
And so there's multiple questions around Z horror show.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Did you watch it? For me, the scariest part was the intro music. I would like literally go and hide somewhere until the story starts. So, which one of the episodes for you has stuck out, or you remember from Z Horror Show?
I was a big, big watcher of Z horror show. huge, big time. And as I told you, in my house, there was no censorship at that time. I was quite young, I think. Z Horror Show, I should have been around college times, right? And that was the time Z came, early college days. And this was a show that fascinated me right off the hook, because until then horror was always adult. Horror was never to be shown on TV. It was only to be on, movies, and that was CD Ramsey movies that you watch chupke se. But this was the first time horror was coming right in your house, and everybody watched. My mother watched, my father watched, we all used to watch that show. What I loved in Z Horror Show, and it could be an influence on me, the reason is because I was so young at that time. So, what really captured my attention was how Indian stories are different from Western horror stories. Because Western horror stories are more about, I would say, gore, or you can also say a kind of extreme horror. But Indian horror stories, they are not so extreme. It is more about atmosphere. It is more about the character that is scary. It is more about a legend. And you don't see that monster or something for a long time, but you just get scared of it, scared of it, scared of it till that final moment. I think most of Zio show stories worked on that premise. Talking about my favorite stories in that, episodes in that, there were two of them that I still remember to this day, I think 30 years down the line. So one of them was the episode with Archana Puran Singh. I think that was the first episode where her head is cut and it is on a platter. That was also the advertisement of Z Horror Show. It was an iconic shot of the show. So that was one episode. I remember bits and pieces of it. There was another episode that I remember. There is another episode that was the adaptation of Monkey's Paw. The story where
Yes,
everybody
yes.
knows that. So they did a adaptation of that. At that time, I had not read Monkey's Paw, so I did not know it. And I saw this Hindi version of it, and it was pretty damn scary. It was almost faithful to the original story, which is what made it scarier. Only thing, they actually showed that ghost monster face at the end. In the book, it is not like that, but
Yeah.
this is Hindi, right? So they have to show that. So I do remember that. Apart from Zia show, I was also a big time fan of Ahat, and later on, there were many other shows that happened. I even wrote a little bit for a show known as Anjan, which was on Discovery. The episodes didn't air because the channel shut down, but I did write for that, and it is on Netflix now. Anjan is the name of the show. Yeah.
Oh wow! So I think there's something else we have to check out.
Behind me, I don't know what happened.
In fact, fun fact, when I was, I think, in 5th grade, we performed the Monkey's Paw on stage. And I played the role of the mother. So my role throughout was to cry. That's all I did. I would hide my face and cry.
The mother's role is very pivotal there, because the mother is the one who is the representative of the desire. And desire is the theme of the whole story, what you want back. Desire for the thing that is lost.
Oh, I think, Neil, what you said, the differentiation between the Western horror and our classical Indian horror. Now, let's just segue into that.
Okay.
So do you feel that Western horror is much more evolved, whereas Indian horror is still running behind booths and dines?
Evolved, yes, but in what way? I mean, technically, yes. Technically, they are much superior to us.
If you take horror, in Western horror, you find a plethora of subgenres inside horror itself.
Yeah.
You have like splatterpunk, you have psychological horror, you have paranormal, you have monsters, and you have like slashers, all sorts of things. You name it, you get a bunch of books on that. Whereas we are still around this. If you see any TV show, it's still both.
The supernatural. So that is definitely there, because horror is a very bold genre. So what you need to do is you have to explore it, and you have to go to an extreme. Now, I don't see this as a problem within the horror genre itself, but overall, when you talk about creative media in India, we are very conservative, and we don't want to break the mold a lot. Even look at our romance films. Where do we go beyond that one grammar of having a hero and a heroine and some family conflict? Where do we go
Mm.
beyond that? So it is the same thing for horror also. One thing that is
Mm.
tried and tested, that is the thing that
Mm.
is being flogged to death. But at
Right.
the same time, yeah. Now, when before that, in Western horror, you have a huge collection with very diverse stuff. You have mentioned most of the things. Like splatterpunk is something that is really, uh, you know, very extreme. And Clive
I'm a huge
Barker,
fan. I'm a huge
something.
fan of Splatterpunk.
Yeah, the Midnight Meat Train. That is
Yes,
my
Clive Barker.
yes. So that is the kind of thing that works
Mm.
there. But in India,
Mhm.
if you show a horror movie which has a lot of blood in it, a lot of
Right.
violence in it, I think the Indian audience is not ready for that yet. We
Indian
are not.
audience is not ready, and censor board will immediately come running with their scissors. Right now
Yes,
even OTT has fallen under their purview.
yes. So again, we are going back into that, the conservative area. And
Mm.
horror, no, already it has this kind of a stigma to it. That horror,
Right.
people who make horror and people who watch horror both are depraved. So we
Right.
already are battling against that stigma,
Perfect.
which is very
Perfect.
unfair because people are still not seeing horror as literature. People are still not seeing it as a form of art, which it is
Exactly.
because every form of literature or art evokes an emotion. And horror is also evoking an emotion, that is fear. It is taking us to that extremity of fear where we will not find fear anymore. Like,
Mm.
डर के आगे जीत है, that kind of thing.
Right. Right.
But we are not seeing that happen because people are still very conservative. And that is why we fall back upon the things that we can show that are identifiable. And hence the Dians and the Boots. And
Right.
also, they are relatable. The reason is
Mm.
because in every society, also, if you go within the urban cities, also, or in the rural areas, people have grown up on these stories.
True.
There is always a legend about a street somewhere in your locality where you should not go because it is haunted. So, that is the kind of horror that we are still dealing with. But people like us, the
Mm.
Hive, me, the other horror authors, we are slowly breaking that. Because I saw
Right.
your Route 13 stories. I read them. And many of them went beyond that, that conventional definition that we have for horror. So
Right.
I think this will change. This will
Mm.
change. Only thing is we have to be consistent
True.
and this has to happen. My next book
Mm.
is the Penguin book that we are talking about.
Right.
That is a very different kind of horror. That is not Diane or my most of my books have been different.
Okay,
So that
I just want to ask that question here. Is it going to be a fiction or is it going to be like the book you
fiction.
did with Jay? Okay, this is
It is
fiction.
fiction. It is a
Ah,
solo book, my own book,
okay.
no co-author there. And this
Mhm.
is very much this is middle grade horror. So
Right.
it is for the first time Penguin, a big publisher like Penguin, decided that middle
Okay.
grade in India deserves horror. And for
Right.
that, they commissioned a book with me. So we worked on it for a
Wonderful.
short time. So when Penguin approached me, they asked me for some ideas for a book for the middle grade, and I gave them a couple of ideas, and they liked
Mhm.
all. They picked this. So this
Okay.
is the one
Okay.
that we are developing and we have had. So it's a commissioned book. It's not a book that has been
Mm.
written yet. It will be
Okay.
2022. So this is middle
Okay.
grade horror. So I'm
Right.
very, very excited about it because middle grade horror in the Goosebumps fashion, but with
Mm-hmm.
a very Indian style. So that is
Wow.
something different that's happening. I have signed
Okay.
another book with Vishwakarma. That is
Ah,
Sapna's Bad Connection. Now that is
right.
also starkly different. Now that is digital horror. So that is horror on digital. You understand social media.
Right. Right.
So
Yes.
there's a stalker who is dead, who is stalking the girl on social media.
Okay.
Again, breaking the mold. So that's what Varad.
Wow.
I'm very optimistic that
Mm.
we are going to change this. We just have
Right.
to stay consistent, and these booths and dines will still be there, and we enjoy them
Mm.
also. I'm not at all averse to them. I enjoy writing about booths, dines, Havelis, Maharanis. One of my books is
Mm.
The Curse of the Maharani, also with
Okay.
Rupa. That's also coming out. So
Okay.
I like to work with all
Okay.
different
So yeah.
subgenres within
Yeah.
horror.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that I have seen evolving in the horror scene, at least not just Western, I think even in Indian horror scene, is now there is horror with social commentary.
Oh
For
yes.
example, we had movies like Get Out, we have movies like Stree, and even Ruhi for that matter.
Mm.
I mean, while it was goofy, it was like scary movie, absolutely
Yeah.
goofy, mindless comedy. But the ending was something that was very empowering,
Yeah.
right? So there is a lot of focus on horror plugged with social commentary, with bringing about a change in the overall perception of your reader, right? So what are some of the things that you are trying to build into your books to bring about a social comment on things that you care about?
And that's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking me that. Because I think no, this is the way for horror to evolve, to make it very contemporary, to pick up issues that matter to us. Why do other literary genres work so well? Because they address an issue that you know, we are going through. And that is also the reason, again, if I fall back upon my own books as an example, that is the reason why Maya's New Husband was such a big hit and why Yakshini was such a big hit.
Hmm.
Now, Yakshini, especially, I'll talk about because Yakshini is completely a social message which underlines the whole text of it. And Yakshini is the story of a girl who is growing up with the spirit of Yakshini within her.
Hmm.
And as she grows, she's in this male dominated rural society. As she grows, when the male gaze starts falling on her, so it is the Yakshini within her that makes her fight back. And she fights back. The men are brutalized. So
Hmm.
this, I always used to think, what if women had that kind of shakti? And that's a very common motive in our Indian culture, to have to represent women as shakti. So that is what the story is about, but that is one aspect of the story. In Yakshini, the other aspect of the story is when the woman fights back, when those men are killed, then how does society look at that woman in return?
Hmm.
So again, that view, a woman who fights back, a woman who is strong, a woman who is a feminist, is never appreciated in our male dominated society. We know that. And it's not only our male dominated society, it's a worldwide thing. So men basically do not like women who will speak out their mind. That is what is the horror of Yakshini. Really, it is apart from that grotesque Yakshini spirit within her. It is more about this, like how does a person who fight back, a victim gets victimized further. So
Hmm.
that is the social message. Now,
Right.
this I think a lot of people talked about it. I had feminist groups talking about Yakshini, and there
Hmm.
were discussions and stuff like that, which were shared with me. So that is probably why it works. So this is an example. Even if we fall back on Maya's New Husband, it is about a woman who is trapped in a marriage with a serial killer. Now, the
Correct.
whole Indian equation of
Hmm.
you don't know what your husband is like, or the husband does not know what the wife is like, for that matter. You only know about your spouse, how much the spouse tells you.
Right.
You don't know more
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
Now, that
That
is
the
the
dynamics between Maya, her mother, and her sister.
yeah.
It is almost like a commentary on the reality.
Yes, I think that is why the books worked. And if I
Hmm.
had just a book where a heroine was, I mean, a woman was walking around in a mansion and there were, ghosts popping at her from every angle, that's
Hmm.
boring, right? I mean, how much would
Yeah.
you read of it? With
Hmm.
my
In
husband,
fact,
too.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Good.
I just wanted to add, in fact, your concept of actually is so relevant because today, if a girl in an Indian family wants to do something beyond the traditions of the family, the first thing she hears is "pagal ho gayi hai kya?"
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that is the first thought that comes in, that she's not acting herself, she's gone crazy. So and you brought that across so beautifully. It is nothing but a complete it's a commentary on the Indian society through Yakshini.
Because it angers me. I get very angry when I see a woman not being treated fairly in the house. Really, I would go as far as to say that I am the most feminist man there is. Because I really do not like this kind of subjugation of someone who takes care of your house, who takes care of your kids and everything. Why not make her an equal partner in your life? And won't your life be better because of that, rather than just keeping it under the thumb? How does that work? So yeah, that was somewhere. Yeah, I'm digressing. This is but what it.
No, it's
Yeah.
actually a very valid point what you're making. And coming back to our topic of discussion, you were talking about horror stories that incorporate
Yes.
social commentary. And do you see this being the way ahead for Indian horror literature? And what other subgenre of horror do you think is going to take off in Indian horror literature?
Okay. Okay. Yes. Just to talk about the social commentary bit a little bit more, and because Maya's New Husband 2 is coming out, The Birth of the
Yes,
Dead.
yes.
So there I have gone one step further with this social
Mhm.
commentary thing, because you will see a lot of mirroring of a society going on
Mm.
there. This kinds of events that happen, which are happening in the world around us, and that is real. That was the real horror for me. I was scared to write some of the things which had to do with politics and religion, rather than showing the ghosts and monsters.
True.
So that My New Husband 2 is a very bold book, and
Mhm.
I don't know how the reception would be, but let us see what happens. And that is a very different kind of horror. It is something
Right.
that needs to be said. And
Mhm.
if you see my social media, I do not talk about all these things on my feed, but you will
Right.
see that in my books. And My Husband 2 is
Mm.
the place where I've gone all out. Bharat, to answer your question, I think books with relevant social messaging are going
Mm.
to rule the roost. That is going to happen because even when I speak with people who want to adapt books for movies,
Right.
producers reach out to me, with ideas for ideas and stuff like that. So there is always this kind of a dictum that if it
Mm.
has an underlying social message, we would be more interested. So that is something that they're actively looking for. Feminist stories work,
Mm.
but we don't want they're not looking, people don't look now for the ablanari kind of stories. That time is gone. So
Absolutely.
now it should be
Absolutely.
like, some the woman has to be a strong character, she has to be a doer. So that
Mm.
is what is actually working, and horror always centers around women. You see it worldwide, you see any kind of horror, apart from maybe, why even, yeah, I was going to say slasher, but no, even slasher horror centers around women. The final girl is always a girl.
All right.
So, okay. And the other thing that is going very big in India right now is paranormal. Paranormal
Mm.
has really like burgeoned.
Mm.
Paranormal is where people, because I think that is because of the paranormal investigators. There were
Right.
lots of, I have collaborated with two. So with
Mm.
Jay Alani and then with Sarbajit and Pooja.
Mm.
So these paranormal investigators, they are. It was earlier. It was a kind of a fad. It was a kind of a,
True.
okay. What are they doing? We don't know. We don't
No,
understand.
no.
I'm
Mm.
talking about the times of Gaurav Tiwari. That time people did
Mm.
not really know what was happening. But today it is a legit profession. Like I
Mm.
know Jay is so popular on social media and people follow him, people listen to things that he says. Sarvajit makes such professional cutting edge videos which people, like watch, and they take it as a very, very serious profession. And that is
Wonderful.
trickling down to literature.
Mm.
Now following is reading our books. And paranormal science is different from our previous Bruce and Dan kind of horror because that
Right.
was supernatural. That was about
That's true.
monsters.
Mm.
That was about creatures. Paranormal is about ghosts. So ghosts are people who have died. They
Mm.
are not. Of course, we may exaggerate and show a little bit monstrous
Yeah.
kind of look to them, but they are basically ghosts, humans who have died, and these stories are very human.
Yeah,
A
it's
good
either malevolent spirits or
concept.
benevolent spirits. Yeah.
Yes, yes. A good reference point would be, as I said, Conjuring, because in Conjuring,
Mm.
it's a ghost story which was
Right.
cracked by the Warren team.
Right.
So that is what is happening in India also. So we
Mm.
have that's a huge genre. I'll just show off my books. They're here.
Uh-huh.
I have Haunted with me.
Okay.
This is with Jay Alani. He's the
Yes.
popular investigator that I talk about.
Yes. Yes.
He has
Yes.
got so many podcasts on Ghana, Savan, and where all.
Yeah, I listen to those
Yes,
Ghana.
I follow Jay as well, and
Yeah.
Sarabjit, and I
Sarbajit,
Guilty
think
pleasure while driving to work, maybe.
Reflective. This is
yes,
Sarvajit. The book with him.
Yes.
yes.
The Spirits Talk to Me.
Spirits talk to me.
Right.
So
Yes,
Spirits Talk to Me has like both these books have like fabulous reviews, and I
Hmm.
did not expect Spirits Talk to Me to do so well because the stories were more with the human angle.
Right.
Like I did not when Sarbajit and I spoke about developing these stories. While Sarbajit gave me really scary stories,
Hmm.
I wanted to also explore what happens to the people in that area. Like, suppose if there is a ghost in your house, I wanted to talk about the people, the aftermath of it. After the
Hmm.
ghost is gone, also what happens. And so I
Correct.
wanted to
Correct.
take up all those things. So that's what we have done with spirits. And I think that is why the book has resonated among horror fans. And paranormal is going bigger. I'm doing another book with Jay,
Hmm.
and with Sarbajit, I have another book also, Ghost Whispers.
Wow.
So yeah, it's becoming bigger.
Good. So I
in
think,
fact, I think Haunting of Hill House is a very good example, the
Yes.
series, not the book, of
Yeah.
what is the aftermath of living in a haunted house.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah,
because Haunting of the Hill House was such a big hit in India on India Netflix, that is why people want to do something like that now. Because these things
correct.
become reference points for us. These
Hmm.
shows, these series
Absolutely.
that work, they tell us the pulse of the audience.
right. So I
Yeah.
think now we are coming up with the sequel to Route 13 called Trail 13. Okay,
Okay.
so I
Awesome.
think we will expect more paranormal stories to flood into our inboxes. I feel
And
because
they will,
we
I'm
feel
sure.
that's the one that's captivating the attention of people.
Mm. No,
And
Hive,
Neil,
the Hive authors are very up with the times, in sync. They know what works. So I like your way of thinking about horror. Yeah.
thanks a lot, Neil.
Thanks,
So
Nikhil. There
now
is
there
a
are a lot
lot
of
of brains.
yeah,
Sorry, Bharat. There is a lot of brainstorming that goes behind all of this, and
Yeah.
we always feel we are like two steps behind the trend. So,
No,
anyways,
no, you're very vigilant.
yeah. There are two
no,
questions, I think two very important questions that have come up from the audience. Tina wants to know why is it that most ghosts on screen are women? And I think that question has been around for quite some time,
Hmm.
right? And the next question is from Shrivali. She says that is there a risk that when we write stories with the backdrop of social commentary, wouldn't it be an overuse of the same trope over and over again?
Hmm. Okay. Let's take Tina's question first. Tina, thanks for your question. And just could you quickly remind me the question? I'm acting like a doof. Yes, why are most ghosts on screen women? Yeah. So the thing is, even I am a culprit here because in Yakshini, my ghost is a woman, right? Now the thing is, why I did that, or why I feel personally as a horror author, having a woman as the central character, whether she be a victim or the ghost herself, is because I believe that you women have a lot of emotions which we can portray. Men are singular. Their emotions are very linear and reactionary. Like something will happen and men will react to that. It's like that. But if you see women's psychology, you will see that there are many ways in which a woman might take a situation forward. And you do not know what she will eventually choose because her weighing of pros and cons works at a different level at a man's. And for me, that is very fascinating because I feel a woman character will always be unpredictable. I can show that kind of thing. Ghosts, when we show Yakshini as a ghost, not ghost, as the bad person, why it really worked so well was because the audience did not know how the Yakshini would act. Sometimes she is good, sometimes she is bad, and Yakshinis are unpredictable spirits by nature. So, that can be only portrayed there. Suppose if you are showing a vengeful bhoot or a Dayan, showing her as a man, also in him as a man, would not make much of a sense because the man would just be there for a singular objective, get it, and bye bye. But a woman will have that kind of emotional connect when because there'll be whole vengeance story, and when that is resolved, then the emotions that will come to play, and a woman may not be that uh, you know working on the one objective. So that's it. I have also written many stories with males as the antagonists. Maya's New Husband is the best example, where Bhaskar Sadachari is the Guru. So I have not
True.
have had a woman as evil
Hmm.
in that. In fact, all the women are good in Maya's New Husband. So
True. In
there,
fact, on
yeah,
yeah.
I could
In fact,
very
on
I could
the
think Bhaskar is so diabolical,
Hmm.
but I could not make him unpredictable. That was the
yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
In fact, on the flip side, if you notice, almost all slasher horror has the slasher as a male.
Yes. Because
Yeah.
there is a singular objective. The slasher of
Absolutely.
whoever he just wants to slash people.
Hmm.
There is no kind of resolution to that. There's not going to be a resolution. How do flicks end? You have to kill the person. You have to kill the guy. That's it. There is no way that he will redeem himself. That's not going to happen. It will be a very far fetched situation. But with a story with a woman as a booth or a Diane,
Hmm.
redemption is definitely on the agenda. You can definitely show a Diane becoming a good woman at the end or a good person at the end. That can be shown. But I will not buy it if you show a man redeeming. I think that somewhere is a very psychological thing. That's the
And the
way we see
shock
it.
value is also there, right? The shock value when the victim is either a woman or
Yeah.
a child is much more amplified than with, it is a man.
Yes.
that's that's some sort of hardwired into our systems. Like a man
Yeah,
dies,
it is
yeah,
also
okay, he dies,
it's
big
a
deal.
stereotyping. Very
Huh.
sorry to say that it's a stereotyping because right from the 40s, right from the time Mahal
Hmm.
came, I think women
Hmm.
have been shown in white saris and candles in the wilderness. So that image has stuck. And as we had
Hmm.
this discussion a few minutes ago, also we do not experiment. A lot of people,
Hmm.
we does not mean we here generally. People don't like to experiment. If there is an image created, why not just cash in on that image? So that is the kind of thing. But yeah, everything is changing, and we don't have. In my books, I see only Yakshini having a woman protagonist,
Hmm.
and Yakshini is also grey. Yakshini is not evil.
Hmm. Hmm.
She is a dichotomy with
A
Maya,
necessary
Maya
evil.
Meenakshi.
She
Yeah,
is a necessary evil.
she's a necessary evil. So that is a kind of. I've shown her like a darker side of Shakti.
Hmm.
So that is it. That you won't call it as evil. So
Yeah.
Tina, you'll have to absolve me. I have not shown any woman.
So
Okay.
back to Shrivali's question.
Diwali's question about the
Neil.
Hmm.
social
Yeah.
commentary. I remember that. So I don't think it will become a trope at all because
Hmm.
social commentary is something that keeps on changing with the times. Our issues keep changing, and
Hmm.
I don't think you see. It depends on how you do it. I'm not talking about putting social commentary on the very face of it.
Right.
No, then it's like, why would you do that? That is very bad writing. It should be an underlying theme. It
Hmm.
should be something that is never explicitly stated, but it
Right.
should be something that is driving the story forward. And social commentary happens everywhere. Take the example of Stephen King's The Shining. It's about alcoholism.
Yes.
I can see the whole story as an alcoholic going towards the deep side, the deep end.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
entirely what he does. So see, again, there is a social commentary, but it is never explicitly stated. Most of Dean Koontz apocalyptic books,
Hmm.
right? They are horror. There is so much social commentary in that. Like what are we? How are we screwing up the world, and what is going to happen? Everything is shown with metaphor. Everything.
Right.
And speaking of metaphor, H.P. Lovecraft. Everything is metaphor.
Absolutely.
Everything is
Absolutely.
analogy. Everything
Hmm.
is figurative. If we can crack that,
Hmm.
that is where we horror writers are becoming more aware. We are spreading something
Right.
out there, a
Right.
message out there, but without actually stating it. That's what we should do.
Perfect. So I think we have a lot of questions about from people who want to get into this genre, who have not dipped their toes into the water yet.
Yeah.
What constitutes a good horror story? What are the key ingredients to it?
What I see in a good horror story are basically, I want to see the character first. For me, it's always a character driven story. Horror stories are, no, I should not say that all horror stories are character driven because they are not. But
Not really.
the stories that I like in horror are those which have a strong character, and the character has a strong motivation, and you can
Hmm.
actually see misery. Monica
Hmm.
just mentions misery, yes, of course. So, stories like that where you will never forget that one character, and that character is so diabolical, and the counterfoil of that character is so strong. And
Hmm.
I don't want again the protagonist to be strong right from the first. Otherwise, it's not a horror story. Then it's fantasy. You need that person to be somewhere in a deluge of weakness and improving, and somehow going and fighting that evil, because there is no other way out. So
Right.
that kind of horror story always works. And if you see, most horror stories are like that. People are
Hmm.
put into a situation where they have nothing else they can do, and it's an extreme situation which may not happen, but it happens to that person, and finally what they do, they fight back because there's nothing else. So that kind of horror story. The second thing that really makes a horror story is the whole atmospheric layout of it. Now, I'm talking about atmospheric. When I talk about it, it's the venue, it's where it
Hmm.
is set. That is, for me, that is very important, very, very important. My locations, I actually have a kind of map for
Hmm.
every story, even if it is a short story. And the map, I don't draw it, but it's in my mind.
Hmm.
So I have in Bhaskar, I had an abandoned garage in Maya's
Yeah,
new
it
I had that.
actually, that garage, imagery you had created,
It was a
almost
character
induced
world.
nausea. It almost
Yes.
induced
So when
nausea.
when I closed my eyes, I could see the
Hmm.
garage. I could see that I
Hmm.
was standing there next to Bhaskar.
Hmm.
So that thing, I think horror writers, we need to really bring that scene alive,
Right,
because that
right,
is what works. And for that, you need to have a location. The location is always important, and this works even in film. In film,
right.
they spend a lot of time doing the recce, because they
Hmm.
want the perfect mansion, the perfect thing where they will set this thing,
True.
the whole thing. Even in Yakshini, when I was setting the compound of the Patil's house, where the most of the first part of the story
Okay.
will play out, how the compound will be, where will be the fence, where will the person jump in from, and there is a compost pit where they hide a dead body. So where
Hmm.
that happens, where is the loft, all these things are in my mind. So this
Hmm.
atmosphere, the entire atmosphere also talks about other things, like how the whole theme and tone of the story is, because your horror
Yes.
story could be darker, it could be lighter. The tones also matters. It should match the story. You cannot use, as authors now, after writing like 15 books, 3 are still to be
Hmm.
published. I can say that all these 15 books do not have the same tone, even though I
Hmm.
am the writer of all of them. And the best example would be when a reviewer pointed out Haunted and Spirits Talk to Me. Both are co-authored books, both are written by me exclusively.
Hmm.
Stories are from those people.
Right.
But even then, in Haunted, the voice of Jay is the voice of Jay. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
captured the voice of Sarbajit in the other book. So that really makes a difference. This is what I
So,
look for in a horror story.
so you need good characters and you need a wonderful,
Atmosphere and a
the
voice.
atmosphere that has to suck you into the whole,
Yes,
story.
yes. And the
And
whole voice of the story, the words you use, the language you use, and the anticipative build-up, that is
right.
absolute must, I
So
feel.
that's the conflict. That's the main conflict. What
Yeah, yeah,
because the story is just the journey the protagonist is going to take.
yeah.
So you need
And
a wonderful conflict.
it is all about how you reveal. Now, if
Right.
you, because horror is, that we fear the unknown. The
Huh.
moment it becomes known, the horror really plummets. It comes to a very low level. So a good horror author will know when to show his cards and how. Now, if you are going to show the monster all at once, again, it's not going to be a very fun story. But
Right.
if you
Right.
build that anticipation, we are all horror writers, so we know how to do it. But I'm talking for the benefit of the new authors, like
Yes.
that's why we need to read such a lot of horror and watch. Reading and
Yes.
watching really helps, because then you know when you have to show what. Just Jurassic Park is a classic example of this. Now, in Jurassic Park, when the T Rex is coming, you don't see the T Rex first. There is so much build up, and that scene, when the glass is in the car and the children are trapped in that car vehicle, and the water starts rippling. Oh my God,
Yes.
that scene makes me shiver even now. Even though it's now classified as a kiddies movie, but that is
Yes.
such a scary scene.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
would I would
absolutely.
say Science, the movie Science by M. Night Shyamalan, in which
Yes,
the
yes,
aliens is thrown for a fraction of a second, and
yes.
I literally jumped out of the seat when that happened. It was
You
amazing.
know, perfect example is the movie Village, again by M. Night Shyamalan,
Yeah.
where it is
Privilege.
unknown horror.
Hmm.
It's like nobody knows what's in the woods, but
Hmm.
something is there in the woods.
Something is there.
Right.
Something is there. That kind
Yeah,
of horror really terrifies you.
Yeah.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
so this thing,
Uh,
when you're talking about what are the things to focus on when you're writing for this for the newbies who are entering into the horror. What as a writer of horror, where do you draw the line beyond which you will be like, no,
Uh,
I'm not going beyond that,
Things
because
that I won't write about.
because I've
There's,
read Maya's New Husband, and you've gone way past the line to such
yes.
for some people.
Yeah.
Their line and where you have gone there, it's way beyond that. But to you as a horror writer, where is that line? Which is your line?
I have a few taboo subjects. Taboo, I would say, like restricted zone, not exactly taboo. Like certain things that I will
Uh,
never write about, but I will
hmm,
not say never. I don't know how it is. But one of the things that I will not write about, or I'll be very, 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 very uncomfortable writing about, is the death of a child. I cannot do that. I cannot even harm a child in my books. So that is something that I feel very strongly about, and I will not
hmm.
do it. Even in Ringa Ringa Roses, my children are all fighters. So
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
thing. Though I have shown a death of a child in that, but that is something that has happened before. Like it's not
Hmm,
happening in the play of the story. So that is something I will never write about. I will never try. I will never, like uh, offend someone's religious sensibilities. That I will never do, because horror has a scope of doing that also. It can happen. So that is the reason I edit. One of my editing readings is only to
hmm.
check that whether I am offending anybody.
Okay.
It I don't want to offend anybody on the basis of religion or on the basis of how they appear, because you'll never find
Hmm,
those kind of pejoratives in my book. No
hmm,
character will do that.
hmm,
There'll be no bigotry or these kinds of things. I really am against, even in my personal life. I
hmm,
really don't like when people tease others in based on how they look. Like in India,
hmm.
it is so common. "Ye mote idhar aa," things like that. So I'm absolutely against that. So that I will never do. That is something I would not say this is a horror thing, but this is what I don't
A
write.
personal thing, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
personal things that I will not write. And in terms of horror, I think there is nothing that I won't write about.
Very
Yeah.
good.
In terms of creating fear, everything.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I have already done that with Maya. I have even included cannibalism. Now what's left? So,
You might be
absolutely.
surprised. I think that some one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, yeah, like, what was it? Cannibalism, nothing. I'm going to do something even more that's going to shock everyone.
yeah,
Yeah,
probably something will come to me.
Huh?
Yeah,
right.
as I told you, what I did not know at that time what I'm writing. I was just writing a
Right.
story that shook me. So that's it.
Uh, so yeah, that's another of our audience questions. Have you ever
Yeah,
got scared while writing your story?
all the time. I
All the
mentioned in the
time.
start
Wow.
that
Yeah, that's
I
what.
was a very cowardly kid, and I still have some of those phobias in me. So this has happened
Hmm.
during Maya's new husband once. I was the scene of the garage where Maya discovers the garage, where she lands into it and she sees all
Huh.
the body parts strewn around.
Yeah.
So I was so scared at that time. I just had to shut my laptop and go and sleep, because I write in the middle of the night when everybody else is asleep anyway. So I could not write that.
Hmm.
Secondly, one of the stories in the spirits talked to me. That was absolutely freaking scary. Sarbajit had just sent the audio narrative of the story to me. And this story is the disgruntled tree. So it was the story about a tree in Odisha. It is
Hmm.
still there in the Balasore
Hmm.
district, where young men just get up in the middle of the night, go to that tree and hang themselves to death. Young, healthy men. So that tree was there. They had cracked that case. So the way he had narrated the story, it was the first story of the spirits that he had told me. I was shaken, like, how can this happen? And the final opening of it, like what is there in the tree, that is very scary. So that was one story that I did not, get out of my head for 3 days, and I did not start writing immediately. I digested it and then I wrote. The other stories were okay because once I knew the kind of stories he's going to give me, I was prepared. So that kind of thing. Apart from that, I'm not really scared because, not like that way scared. I have a lot of phobias, but not that way. And actually, what I do is when I have to write a horror book, when I have to write a manuscript, I go out. I go to a hotel or something. I shut the room. I lock myself there for 7 days, and I write the book there with the do not disturb sign outside. So that's like that. I only come out for food and stuff. So that is how I write. And that room itself, secluding myself in that, I am scaring myself to get into that vibe. That's
Okay. So Neil, I consider myself a bit of Karan Johar, like coffee with Karan.
okay.
So we have a quick rapid fire section for you, right?
Okay.
You have to answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay, no cheating, no thinking, no trying to be politically correct.
Okay.
Okay. Stephen King or Edgar Allan Poe?
Edgar Allan Poe, definitely.
Favorite horror novel?
The Shining.
Favorite horror movie?
The Silence of the Lambs.
Favorite Indian horror novel?
Anything from Narayan Dharap, I suppose.
Okay. Cosmic horror or gothic horror?
Gothic. These are very clear answers.
Yes. Favorite slasher horror movie?
I Know What You Did Last Summer because that was the first movie I watched.
Wonderful. Not Scream, right? Scream came before I Know What You Did Last
Way
Summer.
before, way before.
But I Know What You Did Last Summer was the movie that I watched in a very bad print on cable TV late in the night. That was the first movie we got, and it took me. Immediately after that, I saw the Friday the 13th movies, and then the Halloween movies. But I had already seen that, so I Know What You Did stayed with me more. Though it was not such a good movie, I know that. It's a very, okay movie. Friday the 13th is much scarier. And I think the scariest slasher movie is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That is the old one. It's really scary.
Yeah. Ooh. With that mask, the leather face, right?
Leather face.
Oh,
And the dinner scene in that movie, that is. And I just mentioned the Silence of the Lambs, so I have a very quick anecdote, if we have time, about the Silence of the Lambs. I watched the movie again in bad print at home when I was somewhat in my 12th standard, 11th standard, or something like that. And I did not know anything. Indians, we did not know anything about this movie, what it is and what it is not. So I just watched it. And the scene that I saw, that Anthony Hopkins coming and Jodie Foster outside the bars, oh my God, I could not, I was zapped, I was stunned. I could not do anything for several days. I never watched the movie again. I could not have the courage to watch the movie again in its entirety. When I released Maya's New Husband and I became a horror author and people started knowing me and I was beyond 40, that time I thought that I'm a horror author now and I have not watched Silence of the Lambs fully. I'm still afraid of the movie. I'm still afraid of that very visual of Anthony Hopkins. So I dared myself one night that I'll watch the movie now. And then I watched the movie when I was alone at home, nobody else was there. And that was the kind of my baptism into horror. And I believe that was the movie that, I challenged myself and I watched it.
Even in rom-coms, Jack Nicholson and Anthony Hopkins scare me.
Yeah.
Even when they're acting in rom-coms,
I will tell you,
Jack Nicholson,
Jack Nicholson's scariest movie for me is not The Shining, movie-wise. It is, in fact, it is not a horror movie at all. I'm very scared of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm very scared of that movie because of the entire ambience of that asylum. And the things that are happening in there. So I'm more scared of horror that is not horror. You get my.
Oh, that's close to real life. The depravity is the horror in itself.
Yes. So terror scares me more than horror. So that's how my books also are.
Wonderful. Now we know the process. All right. Next question. Favorite female horror writer?
Shirley Jackson, and I love the lottery. That is
The
the
Lottery. Yes,
yeah.
yes. Brilliant. Okay. Haunting of the Hill House or Stranger Things?
No, not at all. Stranger Things, Haunting of the Hill House. I'm for Gothic.
Okay. All right. Um, Maya's new husband or Yakshini?
Maya's New Husband, pure, raw, unadulterated horror. When I was a nobody, that book made me. So of course, Maya's New Husband. There's no
All
question.
right. Wonderful. Okay. Creepiest place you have ever visited?
Uh, the Goa hotel room. It was a. I
Yeah.
went on a writing trip. I shut myself. It was a little bit away from Kalangut beach, and there's nothing around. Even the internet was not working, and I was in that room and I was writing. Sapna's bad connection, I suppose, and the lights went off. The whole place was desolate, abandoned, and there was a kind of mansion in front, a Portuguese
Mhm.
house, and that
Mm.
was abandoned since like 45 years and dilapidated. There was a big compound, like complete Ramsey vibes. So I
I
was
know that
writing.
place. That
Do you
place
know the
has a
place?
bit of lore. That Portuguese house has a bit of lore about that, if I'm not
Yeah.
wrong.
I
Yeah,
suppose it is
yeah,
the
I know.
same place then. And Goa is has this as an overabundance of these, scary
Yes,
places.
yes,
So that was where I was scared. I was not so scared in the Badok tunnel of Shimla, which it's believed that the captain's ghost still wanders. It is
yes,
India's longest tunnel, so I've been there.
yes.
It is that toy train tunnel when you go to Shimla.
I know.
The
I think
longest tunnel is between.
if I'm not wrong, Meenakshi Chaudhary wrote a story about that in her book. If I'm
Yes,
not wrong.
Meenakshi Chaudhary writes about Shimla, and we have also
Yeah.
written that in Haunted, I suppose. So that
Mm.
tunnel, I went into that tunnel, and but there's nothing. I was not that
Ah.
scared. Of course, I had Jayalani with me, so that matters. But in this Goa place, I was alone, and I was like freaking scared.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Okay. So my last question: Ouija board or tarot cards?
I'm not too much into the symbolism and stuff like that. But if you would ask me, tarot cards, because tarot cards have a kind of mysticism to it. You don't know what might happen. Ouija boards are more of a toy. Ouija board is a toy. It was made by Hasbro, if people didn't know it. It is
Yeah.
a toy which became this thing. But tarot cards really have some kind of occult that we don't understand. Like, what do
Correct.
the sometimes the images are so bizarre, the way they come, the way you choose,
Interpreted. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
the way they connect with you. That's bizarre. And it's something that me, a science student or science postgraduate, also would not understand certain things that happen with it. So, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, and it's also very ancient art. So
Yes,
absolutely.
and the ancient arts are the scariest because
Yes.
you don't know how the world was then. You don't know whether we had the same kind of science at that time. You don't know what creatures moved around in this world, and what you know precipitated that kind of knowledge. That knowledge has come to us. So that is why things like Tantra and Aghor, they are still so
Mm.
scary because they were
True.
made like 5,000, 6,000 years ago. We were
Yeah.
completely different world then.
No,
Who
the
like
same thing. Even in Western, if you take pagan
yeah,
rituals, because
yeah,
people don't know what they were about, whether they were done for good or bad.
yes,
We don't know. So there
yes,
is a lot of what you don't know, you fear it. That's
exactly.
how it works.
And if
Yeah.
you ask me like which place I would like to go to in this world, my dream
Mhm.
location that would be Transylvania. I actually want to go there and see. That is, I consider it to be the birthplace of horror, worldwide horror,
Uh-huh.
because that is where Vlad was, and
Mm.
that gave birth to Dracula.
Right.
So I would like to. I have some friends, Transylvanian friends. I am angling for them to call me or something.
Maybe you should
Romania is
go on
so
like
cool.
you should work with some sort of these ghost hunters there and go to those
Yeah.
places and
I
work
do
on
that
the
with
next
Jay
book.
and Sarvajit. They take me to places, but then they
Uh,
are always around. So the thing is
right.
different. When you
No,
go
you
to
need to
such
work with
places,
international ghost hunters,
yeah, yeah.
paranormal
I
investigators, ghost hunters.
probably that would be my way out. We should all do
Yeah.
it. fun together and go somewhere like this, on a international horror trip. We plan that.
That's actually a wonderful idea. If at all you're planning something, you let us know. We'll be there.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have a work team in Romania. I'm just waiting for my director to tell me you can travel to Romania, and that's it. Count
That's
Dracula
it.
beware.
Take a lot of pictures. Stay in the castle.
Uh,
Absolutely. Let's hope that happens maybe next year. So,
Wonderful. First,
all
let's
right.
hope that we are able to go out of our house safe and sound,
Oh yeah, that is important. We are
Yeah.
because
living a
that
real life horror right now. Like,
yes,
so everybody locked down and since 1 year. This is bizarre, and this is also a message that stay safe, people. You don't know. This is really more than what we think. Like yesterday,
yes,
we had 2,17,000 cases,
yes,
India wide. So
Wow.
not a joke,
Yeah,
not a joke.
yes.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So thanks a lot, Neil. I think we had a wonderful time talking to you,
Same
trying to
here.
understand your journey and like this thing. So, if you want to leave one message to the audience and aspiring writers, what
Yes.
would that be?
I would rather like to leave a message for the readers because aspiring writers I've already spoken to a lot.
Yes.
So I will take this moment to do that, and I would tell the readers that if you don't read horror, please do, because horror is not something that should be shunned or should be thought of like it is a bad kind of genre. Horror is very, very literary. If you read good horror, you will definitely enjoy even the prose, and plus you will get a good story.
Hmm.
There'll be a lot of thoughts to take away, and horror is not just boots and dians and this khadakti kidki and stuff like that. There is a lot more to horror. You have not seen even the tip of the iceberg when it comes to horror. So read it and read some good books. You will really enjoy it. Some of the best authors in the world are horror writers. So we have Stephen King, we have Dean Koontz, we have Richard Matheson, classic horror writers.
And you
Explore
can't
their
forget legends like the granddaddies of horror like H.P. Lovecraft, Arthur Markin, and
yes,
the
yes,
OGs, as the kids
yes.
like to call these days, the OGs.
Correct. And you know what? Horror is not just in horror books. There is horror everywhere. I see horror in our mythology also. There were demons, Rakshasas, Asuras everywhere.
Yes,
Horror is everywhere. But the thing is, just because our books fall into that category of horror, some people run away in the other direction. I don't think that is fair. That is not fair at
true.
all because, unless you explore, how can you call yourself as an avid reader? To be an avid reader, you have to explore.
As the point you mentioned about our myths is spot on. No, we've had Vikram or Betal,
Yeah, that is horror.
and we have been reading about that from our childhood, and that's
Mahabharata
horror, right?
has
That has
such a
elements of
lot of
horror.
power. Yeah.
Yes,
Even
yes,
Ramayana for that extent, because the whole
yes.
scene when they were in the Vanvas and the rishis do the yajna and the
Huh.
demons they come and
Try to
spoil
come
it.
and destroy it, and
That
these
whole thing
people.
is so scary. That is absolute
Yep.
horror. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Brilliant. I think that was wonderful, Neil. Thanks a lot
Thank you so much
for
for this.
indulging us.
Thank you for
Yes.
the listeners also for their questions. I will not name you
Definitely,
each person because thank you for listening, whoever is listening. Thanks and best
definitely.
wishes to the Hive.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you
Neil.
so
Thanks a
much,
lot.
Neil. And, honestly, I think on behalf of Varad and I, we've had super amount of fun. I did not expect this discussion to be so much fun. And I'm a
Yes.
little jealous that my son got to meet you before I did, face to face.
How is it
Yeah,
going? I hope everything's well, sitting at home. I mean,
he's
at the
doing good. He's expanding on the story that you helped him write in the workshop.
That's nice.
So yes,
Best
yes,
wishes for him too.
the story is not going anywhere. So we'll talk about that later. All
Wonderful.
right. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Neil, and thanks, Bharat, for being my partner in arms here. And
It's our pleasure.
have a lovely weekend. Thanks a lot.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye.
safe and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.